Welcome to AMM 251 Apparel Merchandise Buying 1, and today we're going to talk about the dollar merchandise plan or the 6-month plan, and two main parts. Either the first part, which is the actual budget, the actual dollar merchandise plan, and the second part is open to buy. So dollar merchandise plan essentially is a budget that coordinates your sales, what you're planning to have in sales, and what you're planning to have at stock. Open to buy, or OTB is how we typically abbreviate, represents the dollar amount of product or merchandise that the buyer can receive during the balance or the remainder of a given month. In other words, how much money you have, dollars, that you can spend on product to be received for a particular time period. So when you say a buyer ran out of open to buy, they ran out of money to buy product. Okay, so what's my open to buy? Or sometimes if you want to go buy product, they'll say how much open to buy do you have. They want to know how many dollars you have available to make orders. So your objective is to plan, forecast, and control. This is very important. You're planning. So we're doing 6-month plan. It's in the name. So part of the planning process is forecasting, right? Because it hasn't happened yet. But you're also controlling, as you'll see in the templates that will be given to you. There's usually a row that says actual, there's planned, actual, and revised. So you're planning, it hasn't happened yet, you're forecasting, but then as the season starts, you can start making changes whenever they are needed. Okay, so if your sales are too sluggish, if you had to do more markdowns, if stock's moving too slow, if it's moving too fast, there's different things that happen. So you do actually have to control it, so you modify it as you go along. So it's not set in stone, but you start off with a plan. And so control is an important word here. The purchase and sales of merchandise, and very important part, at a profit. Remember, your boss doesn't want to hear that sales are bad or that consumer spending is slow. They want increase in profits, okay? Always research previous figures. You always look at the exact same time period, the previous year, and you integrate all activities that you need to do to buy stock, to plan stock, and look at all the different factors and variables you have to look at so you can do an estimated planned sales amount. Okay, so the format, it does vary, but it generally covers a 6-month plan. It can be for 1 month, it can be for a full year, but typically more often than not, it's for 6 months. We usually divide it with the spring season or the fall season. So the fall season starts in August and ends in January, and spring starts from February to July. Okay, so that's typically in retail how we do it. Most plans include planned sales, planned stocks, planned markdowns. We call it, a lot of times on the form it says retail reductions, planning markups, planned purchases. Also, a lot of them will have stock turnover, cash discounts, alteration costs, selling payroll expenses, gross margin. Those sometimes are on, sometimes they're not. It just depends on the format that you'll be using in the company that you work for. So planning sales is the first portion of it, planned sales. So you forecast dollar sales for the entire period first, and then you look at how much sales should it be per month. And in a 6-month plan, you look at 6 months at a time. So you're going to always review and analyze past sales. Then you make changes based on the following. So current sales trends, previous rate growth patterns, so certain times of the year you tend to have more sales than others, economic conditions, if sales or the economy is doing really well or it's doing really poorly, fashion factors, if you have a lot of items that are trendy or you don't have enough items that are trendy, what your competition is doing. If they're suffering, then you're getting more of the market, or if they're doing really good, you're getting less of the market. The overall market direction, and changes within in the store department. So certain things like renovations will hurt your sales. Canceling a certain brand that's popular might bring a problem. Acquiring a new brand that you didn't have before can bring good things. So it just depends on these changes. Otherwise, you just copy from last year to make your life a lot easier. But we make changes based on these factors. So this is a look of a budget, a 6-month plan. As you can see, we'll talk about and look at all these individual items, but stock, sales, retail reductions, which is markdowns. BOM stands for beginning of month. EOM stands for end of month. Plan purchases, and we're going to look at figures at retail and at cost, and for 6 months, and we'll have total amounts as well. And we'll look at what these individual items are. Okay, so this is a skeletal kind of blank format. So get used to looking at that. So planned sales, Again, look at past sales, figure out percent increase or decrease. So you can see if it's a 1% increase they're planning on, or a 5% or a 10%, because that would make a difference. Determine total sales for the season, and then divide it and project for each month. Okay, so I've told you this is the formula from day one. I told you about this year minus last year divided by last year gives you a percent sale increase or decrease plan. So, and usually you plan for an increase. And then you look at past distribution. So you look at that, and then you look at past distributions, industry distributions, and any special promotions. Also look at shifting holidays, particular Easter. Easter brings in a lot of sales for spring. Spring wardrobes are usually purchased during Easter, for Easter, right before that. So, but it shifts. 4th of July is always on the 4th, but Easter can shift. So depending on when that lands. So always compare that to last year, because sometimes if you plan on higher sales when Easter, and last year Easter was earlier or later, that can change your plans for this year. Okay, so keep that in mind. A good way to look at that sales distribution we're talking about is looking at a sales curve. So it it gives you a visual of the peak. So you can see here by looking at the sales curve, it's just basically a graph chart, and it shows you very quickly by just looking at this. I could see October has the highest sales amount, where August has the least. So if I'm going to distribute percentages, if I get planned sales for the 6 months, and now I'm planning for this month, I would plan, by just looking at this, I would say, okay, October should have the highest amount of sales. Again, I'm expecting that. So I'm going to give October the highest percentage. I'm going to give August the least amount, because obviously sales are much lower in August than any of the other months. Okay. So formulas that we need to look at. First one is planned sales for the month. You're going to take planned sales percentage for the month. So you get a planned percentage. It's usually given to you. It's decided as a department. And you multiply by the planned total sales. For a 6-month plan, it's a planned sales for the 6 months for your department. And that gives you planned sales for the month. So let's look at this example. Let's say for this particular department, February, you're given a 15% planned sales percentage for February. Your planned total sales for the period, and as you can see, it's February to July, so this is for spring. You can see that it's 500,000, that's $500,000. So that's what's planned for the 6 months, for the entire 6 months, $500,000 in planned sales. So that means 15% of that you're going to be expecting for February. So think of it that way. So it's 15% times 500,000. When you punch it in your calculator, it's 0.15 times 500,000, and that gives you $75,000. That's what you're planning on sales for February. Okay, and then you plug it in. Then you're going to repeat the same steps for March, April, May, June, and July, and then you get your totals. Okay, so that's how it's going to work. You're going to get each category, and then you do it for 1 month, and then you repeat the steps for the remaining months. Okay, now there's a couple of problems here, because you have to take that concept and apply basic math and common sense math to be able to determine this, because you'll get different scenarios. So this one's pretty straightforward. If a shoe department had net sales of $225,000 last year for spring, and they plan on having $300,000 in net sales this season, so they're planning an increase, what is the percentage of sales increase, right? So again, this year minus last year divided by last year. So 300,000 minus 225,000 divided by 225,000 gives you 33.33% increase. Okay, so that's what they're planning on. They're planning on a 33.33% increase. Okay. Now let's look at another problem. So this is where basic common sense math kicks in. So for the spring period, the handbag department's total season sales volume for last year was 750,000. Okay, so for the season last year, 750,000. If there's an 8% increase this year, what is the dollar amount of planned sales? Okay, so you need to figure that out. So if last year's was 750,000 and there's a planned 8% increase from that, then you need to find out what's the 8% of 750,000. So you're going to multiply 750,000 times 8. Remember, when you put it in your calculator, it's 0.008, and that gives you $6,000. You add that to that original amount, because now you're planning that for sales for this year. It's an increase, right? So 750,000 plus 6,000 is 756,000. And you can always check if you're like, I don't know if that sounds right. Okay, then plug it into the formula. This year minus last year divided by last year. If you do that, this year would be the 756,000. Last year would be 750. Plug it in, and you'll see that you will get 0.008 or 8%. Okay, so it'll check out. Another problem. During the month of August, sales for sporting goods store are planned at 900,000, which is 15% of planned season's total sales. Calculate monthly sales for the balance of the season. okay, if sales are planned as follows. So they're giving you 6 months, they're giving you the planned percentage. They're not telling you what the total season is. You have to figure that out. So they're telling you August. They're telling you August planned sales is 900,000, which is 15% of the total season. So 900,000 is 15% of the total season. That's what you need to calculate. You need the total season so you can calculate the rest of the months. So 900,000 is 15% of the base. Okay, so this goes back to, again, chapter 2, basic math. So you're going to take 900,000 and you're going to divide by 15% or 0.15, and that gives you 6 million. So they're planning on $6 million for the season. Then you're going to take that 6 million and you're going to multiply by each percentage. August is done for you, 900,000. You do September, October, so calculate each one, take your calculators out and multiply, and you should get these amounts, okay? So go ahead and do that and see if you get these amounts. If not, make sure that you're punching in the right decimal point. If at any point you plan a decrease, it's actual sales minus planned sales divided by actual sales, but it's the same basic concept. So you plan sales is first, then you're going to do your planned stock. Things that you need to know: BOM stock is the dollar amount of stock required on hand at the beginning of the month, so the first of the month. EOM stock is the same, except at the end of the month. So the last day of the month, whether it's the 28th, the 31st, or the 30th, it's the dollar stock required on hand. And turnover is the velocity or the speed that the merchandise moves. So another way of looking at it is stock turn, and it's the number of times on average stock is sold. So it's stock turn, so turnover rate. Okay, so it's a rate. So turnover is stock turn, which means the same thing. We always abbreviate TO, not timeout. It's turnover. Turnover rate is net sales at retail divided by average stock at retail. So this is going to be important to remember how to calculate average stock. So average stock means you're going to add all the beginning of month stock for each month, all your BOM. So there's 6 of them, and then you're going to add the EOM or the end of month stock of the last month. Okay, you're going to add that. And then you're going to divide by the total number of inventories. So since there's 6 inventories here, BOM, 6 BOMs plus 1 EOM, 6 plus 1 is 7, you're going to divide by 7 because there's 7 inventories in the numerator, okay? And that will give you turnover rate, okay? Average retail. And then you're going to take that and divide into net sales, and that will give you, let me go back, that will give you, divide that into your net sales at retail, and that's going to give you your turnover rate if you have to calculate that. Okay, stock to sales ratio, basically the correlation or the relationship between stock on hand, how much you have on hand at the beginning of the month, and retail sales for that month. So it's looking at stock and sales comparison. So we definitely look at stock planning in terms of money and stock that you have, and in terms of sales. So if sales are too slow and you have too much product, there's a problem. And if you have high sales but not enough product, there's a problem. So you can look at stock and plan it in 2 ways: stock to sales ratio or basic stock. So for today, for this lecture, we're going to focus on stock to sales ratio. Next time, we're going to talk about basic stock format. But your book goes over both, and you do have to review that. So the formula is retail stock at any given time divided by the sales for that period. That's how you get a stock to sales ratio. You take the retail stock at any given time in the period, and you divide by sales for the period, and that gives you stock to sales ratio. But for our first exercises, you're going to be given the stock to sales ratio. You just need to calculate the BOM stock. So how do you figure planned BOM stock for the month? You're going to take the planned sales for the month, and you're going to multiply by the planned stock to sales ratio. Okay? Remember, basic stock is going to be a different way, and I'll show you that next time. So you're going to take your ratio and you're going to multiply by the planned sales. So in our first example, we planned February sales to be 75,000, right? So the stock to sales ratio is 3 for February. So you're going to take the stock to sales ratio and multiply that by the planned sales. So planned sales is 75,000, and you're going to multiply by 3, which is the stock to sales ratio, and that will give you 225,000. That's what you're planning to have of retail dollars worth of stock on hand at the beginning of the month. So on February 1st, you're planning on having $225,000 worth of product on hand. Okay, so it's either on your floor or in your stock room, but it's there. Okay, and you repeat for each month. So you take the planned sales and multiply by the stock to sales ratio to get the BOM for each month. Okay, and that's using the stock to sales ratio method. Okay. Again, basic stock method we'll show you later. So how do you plan? Next is markdowns or clearance. Okay, so how do you plan markdowns? You're gonna, and there's a couple different ways, but the main way is taking planned sales for the month. You're gonna multiply by planned markdown percentage for the month, and that gives you planned markdowns. Okay, so planned markdowns in this case, it's estimated to be at 10%. Okay, 10% for February. So since February has $75,000 in planned sales, you're gonna take $75,000 times 10% or 0.10 in your calculator, and that means you're planning on having, in terms of markdown, $7,500 for the month of February. Okay. Next is EOM stock or end of month stock. This one's pretty simple. Okay, the planned BOM for the following month is the EOM for that current month. Okay, so when you're looking at you always calculate BOM stocks first. And then when you look at EOM, you're just going to look at the BOM of the next month. So if we're calculating for February, we're going to look at the BOM for March, and that'll be the EOM for February. Because think about it. The last day you calculate, you close down your cash wrap and everything, that's what you start off with the next day, the first of the month, right? So you're going to look at the BOM for March, which in this case is 300,000. So that means that's 300,000 for the EOM in February, okay? So a good question that should come up is, well, wait a minute, what do you do at the end of the 6 months? You don't have the next month. So you either take an average of all your BOMs and get an average, or you get a memo telling you what's the stock to sales ratio and planned sales for the first month of the next season. And then you can calculate your EOM, okay? Next is planned purchases. And we usually listed on the 6-month plan at retail and at cost. So let's look at retail first. So planned purchases, this is the formula, so you have to know it. You're going to take your planned BOM stocks, you're going to look at your planned sales, you're going to use planned markdowns, and you're going to use your EOM stock. That means that if any of these figures are wrong, your planned purchases at retail are going to be wrong too. So you have to be very careful. So this is where the rounding up or rounding down is really going to be a problem. Remember I told you? Okay, this is why. Because once you start rounding up, not only are your totals going to be wrong, planned purchase is going to be wrong too. So this is how you start it. You're going to take your planned sales. I recommend planned sales first because that's what you calculate first anyways. Planned sales plus planned markdowns, okay, plus EOM. So you add EOM, end of month stock, and you subtract beginning of month stock. So again, planned sales plus planned markdowns plus planned BOM minus planned BOM. Okay, and usually students reverse that, but it's you add the end of month stock, you subtract beginning. So you're going to take your planned sales plus your planned markdowns plus your planned EOM stock, subtract the BOM, and that gives you, in this case, $157,500 as your planned purchases at retail for the month. So you're going to do the same thing for each month, okay? Now that's planned purchases at retail. You also usually are asked to calculate planned purchases at cost because these are planned purchases, so it's good to see the cost figure. So all you have to do is take your planned purchases at retail and you're going to multiply by the cost percentage or the cost complement. So you're going to take planned purchases at retail and you're going to multiply by 100% minus markup. So it's always planned initial markup because obviously it hasn't happened yet. So they're planning on a markup overall of 45%. So you would take 100% minus 45%, okay, and you're going to multiply that by, for each month, by the planned purchases at retail. So for February, planned purchases at retail is $157,500, and then you're going to multiply by 100% minus 45%, and that'll give you $86,625. Okay, so that's the planned purchases at cost. As you can see, because the markup is close to 50, this should be close to half of that, okay, at retail. So this is planned purchases at cost, this is at retail, and you would do that for every month. So a couple of formulas, and they are all in your book, by the way, so make sure you review that. But turnover, again, stock turn, net sales at retail divided by average stock at retail. So let's review because we went over that originally. Average retail stock, planned sales for the period, divided by the turnover rate. So sometimes you'll have the turnover rate given to you. So you take your planned sales for the period and divide by turnover rate. That gives you average retail stock. So if you need to calculate that, that's how you would do that. Another way of calculating average retail stock is if you have all the inventories, then you sum all or you add all your BOM inventories and add the EOM of the last month divided by the total number of inventories. So if you don't have this data but you have turnover rate, then this is how you would calculate average retail stock, ARS. Or if you have all the inventories listed, then you would do it this way. So you have a couple options there. Now, another way of looking at GMROI is gross margin return per dollar of inventory, and we've done this before. Again, this is used to measure capital turnover efficiency. When you don't have gross margin dollars, okay, you don't have gross margin dollars, there's a formula to calculate GMROI. So you take your gross margin percent and you multiply by turnover. That's why we haven't gone over it yet, because you didn't know what turnover rate was. Well, now we've gone over it. So you take your gross margin percent, you multiply by the turnover rate, and then you divide by the cost percentage or the cost complement, 100% minus markup, okay? And that would give you GMROI. So that's another way of looking at it. So another way of looking at it is how much is made on a sale times how long it takes to sell it, right? The speed, because we're looking at velocity here, and divide by how much was paid for it. Okay, so that's another way of looking at it. So when there's a space to calculate GMROI for a 6-month plan, you use the turnover rate because it's there. Okay, so this was a quick, very quick, so you can always go back and review, but this is the lecture on 6-month plan. We are going to go over how to calculate BOM stock using basic stock method. So there's 2 ways of doing it. We'll do that next week, but at least this gets you started on your 6-month plan and your homework and how we're going to be looking at dollar merchandise plans and budget planning. Okay, next time we'll talk about basic stock method. We'll also look at open to buy, and that will also be included in most 6-month plans. So we'll talk about that. So that'll be part 2. Okay, thank you for listening.